kalikasan, sinusulong ang pagtulong sa kapwa kahit sino. Accert, approve ka sa puso. Accert, partner mo. Accert, approve ka sa puso. Accert, partner mo. Kahit sino, kahit saan, kahit kailan kami nandyan, handang tumulong kanino man. Partner mo kami kaibigan. Buong puso ang serbisyo sa kapwa kahit man sino. Accert, approve ka sa puso. Accert, partner mo. Accert, approve ka sa puso. Accert, partner mo. Accert, tayo'y Pilipino. Accert, partner mo. Accert, tayo'y Pilipino. Accert, partner mo. Accert, isigaw. Accert, sabay-sabay. Accert, sumigaw. Accert, sabay-sabay. Accert, approve ka sa puso. Accert, partner mo. Accert.
Magandang gabi, Luzon, Visayas at Mindanao at lalong-lalo na po sa ating mga ka-junior Accert. Hindi lang mga junior Accert, sa ating mga youth Accert at sa Accert talaga. Magandang gabi sa inyong lahat din. Magandang araw, magandang gabi o kahit anong oras man dyan sa buong mundo, lalong-lalo na sa ating mga kapartner na OFW. Magandang gabi sa inyong lahat. Yun nga sinabi ko, kahit anong oras man, basta maganda kayo dyan. Yun ang importante, maganda at saka safe. Magandang gabi din sa ating Accert officers, lalong-lalo na po kay Dr. Miguel C. Ortiz, ating VP for Mindanao, Dr. Alexander Simbulan, and to our National Director for Junior Accert, Dr. Elmer A. Palacio, at ang VP natin for Junior Accert Mindanao, kapartner ko na sa Engineer Colleen Acosta. Magandang gabi sa inyong lahat. And andito na naman po tayo ulit. Sama-sama na naman po tayo hanggang alas 8 ng gabi with Miss A sa Junior Accert, right only here sa Oro Broadcast Media. Kumusta sa ating mga kapartner? It's Friday. So, ayan, tamang-tama na yung nasabi ko. Friday na talaga ngayon. And tomorrow is holiday. Oh. So, saan ba kayo pag holiday? Minsan naman kasi, yung iba, may trabaho kahit Sabado at Linggo. But since tomorrow is a holiday, siguro meron kayong mga plano kung saan kayo mag-outing. But remember mga kapartner, hindi pa rin safe. Kaya huwag gumala kahit saan. Pangalagaan natin ang ating sarili, proteksyonan po natin. Stay at home lang sana, no? Kung pwede, mag-stay at home lang muna tayo. And then do not forget to eat healthy foods, boost your immune system with vitamins. Lalong-lalo ng vitamin C po para sa ating immune system. And eat healthy foods. Pangalagaan natin yung sarili natin by sleeping early, yan, matulog ng maaga. Tapos, kumain ng mga masustansyang pagkain. And pag nasa labas tayo o kahit nasa loob ng tahanan, mag-social distancing pa rin. Pag hindi kumakain, syempre, you wear your mask. Mas maganda mas mabuti na yung safe kaysa, di ba, prevention is better than cure. Agree ba kayo mga ka-online? And, pag nasa labas naman, dapat mag-wear din talaga ng mask and face shield. Magdala ng alcohol kasi nga hindi naman all the time merong available na sabon at available na water. Kaya magdala po tayo ng alcohol. And keep distancing from other people or maintain the physical distancing. Napaka-importante po yan ngayon kasi ang cases po natin sa Pilipinas tumataas po. Ayaw po nating matulad sa India, di ba? Kasi dapat po pinoprotektahan natin ang isa't isa, yung sarili natin, number one, para we can also protect our loved ones. Magandang gabi sa ating 400 viewers. Thank you for watching Junior Accert program right only here sa Aura Broadcast Media. Magandang gabi to Legion Flores. Maraming salamat for watching, Legion. And sa mga nanonood dyan ngayon, pwede nyo pong i-comment ang sino gusto nyong i-greet. Okay, magandang gabi din sa ating lovebirds dito sa station. Napaka-sweet naman. Tapos na po ang Valentine's Day. Pero yan, tuloy pa rin sweetness. Parang honey lang. Honey. Pero safe naman yung pagka-sweet nila. Kasi nagsisweet sila, gamit lang yung cellphone nila. So, dun lang sinaghaharutan. So, maintain pa rin yung physical distancing nilang dalawa. So, paano nga ba magharutan sa cellphone? I mean, dun sila siguro nag-exchange ng kanilang conversation through social media. Ayan. So, selfie lang sila. Yung mga pakis-kiss nila, send na lang nila through video. So, sa ating mga kapartner dyan na nanonood, keep safe po kayong lahat. Protect po kayo. Like me, I'm wearing my mask now para iwas-iwas matalsik yung laway kahit saan. Hindi natin alam if baka nga kasi merong mga asymptomatic. So, hindi natin nalalaman if carrier ba tayo o hindi. So, let's keep ourselves protected so that we can also protect our loved ones, especially our family. So, napag-usapan natin last Wednesday yung about disaster. 'Di ba? Yung yung man-made disaster at saka yung natural disaster. So, minsan kasi, andyan na yung mga natural calamities that can cause disaster pag meron na siyang destruction. So, tinatawag natin yung natural disaster. Yung mga man-made disaster naman, yun yung mga human activities that can cause destruction sa atin. No? Babalik sa atin yung mga human activities na ginagawa natin. Pag may destruction yun, nagiging nagiging man-made disaster na siya. Meron nga tayong, speaking of that man-made disaster or human disaster, man-made disaster, tama nga pala yun. Ano ba? Nawawala si Miss A. Pero andito lang pala ako. So, andito lang ako sa station. Nawawala lang sa mga sinasabi. Speaking of man-made disaster, yan yung pag-usapan natin ngayon. 'Di ba? Isa sa pinakamalaking problema na hinaharap natin ngayon sa ating bansa at sa buong mundo, yung environmental issues. Hindi lang tong COVID, but kasama na rin tong environmental issues. Mga nai-experience natin na climate change, masyadong bigla lang, masyadong mainit, tapos mamaya't umuulan, 'di ba? Hindi natin ma-predict. Minsan kainit lang, like ngayon dry season. Pero bakit minsan umuulan? 'Di ba? May mga low pressure. Minsan may bagyo, so hindi natin ma-predict yung mga ganung bagay. Makikita natin siya sa pag-asa na merong paparating. Pero kaya lang parang hindi niya season kasi dry season nga ngayon. So meron ng mga climate change. So Alam niyo ba na isa yan? Nagkakaroon tayo ng climate change or nagkaroon talaga tayo ng climate change dahil sa human activity. Do you agree with me? Agree ba kayo mga ka-online? Kasi tama yan. Diba? Nagkakaroon tayo ng mga changes. So dahil din sa the result of human activity. Yung pag-cut ng trees na hindi natin kinakat natin kahit maliliit pa lang, kahit hindi pa pwede, yung tinatawag nating hinog. Yung pwede nang putulin. So may mga ganun na pinuputol kahit hindi naman pinuputol yung mga puno kahit walang pinuputol lang na hindi pinapalitan. Dapat kasi pangalaga natin, we should always find time na mag-replanting tayo, i-replace natin yung mga naputol. Kasi nga, human activity din, bakit natin ginagawa? Bakit ginagawa ng mga tao to? Dahil meron tayong tinatawag na human needs. 'Di ba? Mga pangangailangan natin at saka yung mga gusto lang natin. So, ano ba yung difference between needs and wants? So, magkakaiba yan. Pag sinabi nating needs, yun talaga yung mga pangangailangan mo that you can't live without those, na hindi ka survive without those. Pag want lang, gusto mo lang to have it. No, marami tayong mga gamit sa bahay dahil tinitingnan natin dahil gustong-gusto natin masyado. Even sa mga gadgets natin, lagi tayong nag-a-update, 'di ba? We keep on updating our gadgets. Tapos meron pa tayong mga pa-collections kasi gustong-gusto natin yung mag-collect ng mga shoes, lalong-lalo na pag yung mga latest model. For example, gustong-gusto mo yung mga Jordan, no? Mga latest fashion ng Jordan shoes. So, nagko-collect ka ng ganun. Mga Nike shoes o kahit ano pa. Or yung mga anime figures. Or ang daming mga gusto nating i-collect. Yung mga babae nga, sinasabi nga nila, ano kayang susuotin ko ngayong araw na to? Kasi wala na akong masuot, but only to find out. Pag titingnan mo yung wardrobe niya, ang dami palang mga damit ng mga babae, di ba? Alam niyo, fact, isa yan sa fact. Mga facts about women. Sinasabing walang masusuot, pero pag tinitignan mo yung wardrobe niya, ang dami palang mga damit na pwede pang suotin. Pero bakit kaya? Di ba? May mga ganun. So, minsan, mga taong very obsessed sa mga gamit. Ang daming shoes, ang daming mga damit, ang daming binibili. Kahit lang nagwi-window shopping, meron kang mabibili. No? Kahit hindi mo naman kailangan, binibili mo. Ang dami tayong mga ganong maraming mga wants. But actually, yung mga wants na yon hindi natin needs. Agree ba kayo mga ka-online? Yan, dapat agree kayo. Maraming salamat sa nag-agree. But hi to our partner Christian Joshua Rosario. Sabi niya, good PM po. Pa-shoutout po naman po partner, lalo na po ang MD namin na si Mark Ford Pedrosa and Secretary Albert De La Cruz and officer member at Junior Accert, Rami Yoj Sarox. And thank you for watching, partner. And sa ating mga kapartner just joined our program tonight, once again, I'm asking for your support simply by sharing our programs. Do not forget also to like and share lang po. Do not also forget to visit our page or Broadcast Media, like and share our program. Para mas maraming share, mas malawak po ang mararating or mas malayo ang karatingan ng ating programang to. So mas marami po tayong mas malawak, mas wide, 'di ba? Mas malayo. So ibig sabihin lang niyan ay mas maraming makakapanood, mas marami tayong ma-share ng ganitong information, mas marami tayong ma-educate sa ganitong mga topic. At lalong-lalo na sa ating mga kabataan, yung mga junior Accert dyan na nanonood, thank you so much. Palakpakan naman natin yung mga junior Accert member. Yan. And speaking of junior Accert member, paano nga ba magpa-member? So ito, If you're interested to be part of the Junior Accert, ito po, this is open to all youth who are peace-loving and community-oriented one, who is ready to set aside personal interest and gain in order to serve the community. Requirements for Junior Accert membership on voluntary basis are as follows. Must be an able-bodied youth. Must be between 18 to 23 years old for youth Accert. For Junior Accert naman, 17 years old below. Has no medical and mental illness. He or she is not convicted and currently serving the penalty of any crimes. Must not be a member of any armed group or organization operating against the government. And lastly, must have consent from the parents or guardian. At speaking naman sa parents at guardian natin, huwag nating hayaan yung mga kabataan natin na kung sino-sino lang yung mga kasama. Dapat i-check po natin, guide po natin sila. Dapat ma-monitor natin yung mga anak, yung mga kabataan, yung mga anak nyo sa bahay. Kung may mga below or still under sa inyong sa pangangalaga, dapat i-monitor talaga kung anong mga ginagawa nila, kung anong mga grupo yung mga pinapasukan nito, sino ba yung mga kasama. Like ngayon, mas madali lang yung communication kasi mas sila sa social media, di ba? Mas attached sila masyado sa kanilang gadget. And saka kahit ano-ano pa yung mga pinapanood nila, ginagawa nila sa social media. Very important po sa ating mga parents dyan, yung mga guardians na nanonood, gabayan po natin ang ating mga anak, yung mga kabataan po. So yan, going back sa napag-usapan natin, yung human activities na nag-cause sa atin ng destruction, na nagiging disaster na siya, yung tinatawag nating man-made disaster. So yun, ang dami nating binibili, 'di ba? Yung needs and want, yung kaibahan na yun. Kasi pag sinasabi nating need, we will not survive without it. 'Di ba? Hahanap-hanapin natin gaya ng pagkain. Ano pa ba? Yung bahay, 'di ba? Sabi nating food, shelter, education, kasama na rin yan sa basic needs. Ano pa ba? Yung mga basic needs, yun talaga yung mga needs. Yung wants naman, yun lang talaga ang gusto. Maraming reasons why we want it or why we want that thing. Maybe because we want to be part of the trend. Kasi it's the trend. We want to be in. Or that word, wanna be. Are you familiar with that song na Wannabe from Spice Girls? Or baka batang 90s talaga kasi. Yung iba natin di na nakaka-relate. So yan. Yung magdami na nating stuff, yung sinasabi nating, speaking of stuff, yung mga things that binibili natin, pumupunta tayo. Ayan, mag-window shopping lang kasi nabagot ako. And when you go to the mall, kahit window shopping lang, wala kang budget but meron kang nagustuhan, ayun, nakabili ka na. Or kahit sa pagkain, di ba? Kahit nakakain ka ng breakfast but you still you're craving for something. Gusto-gusto mong kumain ng something sweet. At yung mga lalagyan ng mga kinikrave natin, minsan, hindi kasi siya biodegradable. Non-bio. They're using plastics. Ako, I'm fan of drinking frap. Pero, minsan yung mga stores, plastic talaga yung lalagyan. So after that, after consuming that frap, it will only take me let's say 5 minutes kung uhaw na uhaw talaga ako. So after that, it's a throw na. 'Di ba? Syempre, to throw in a proper place, but sana naman yun pupunta yung mga stuff. So minsan kasi yung mga human activity, hindi natin nalalaman na meron pala yung limitation. Na hindi natin malalaman lahat ng waste natin kasi we keep on buying things, we keep on buying stuff kahit hindi naman kasi natin kailangan, hindi natin alam na meron palang limitation yan. So sa pagre-reduce recycle lang kasi, ano lang yan, small percent lang yan sa kabubuan kung how can we really protect our environment. Yun lang, isa lang yan sa mga ways on how to protect our environment. But don't you know, ang sa system is really very important. Meron tayong system in the society, pero we have this limitation na handyan lang and what to do pagdating na dyan sa limitation. So, I heard from, I read an article about bakit kailangan ng pusa sa Australia, something like that. So, ang dami kasing mga rodents or rats dun sa Australia, kaya they tried to raise cats. Yun, nawala yung balance. Bakit nawala yung balance? Masyadong dumami yung mga stray cats. Hindi nila alam sino bang pwedeng kumain ng cat. 'Di ba? Hindi naman kasi lahat kumakain ng cat. Ng pusa, 'di ba? Hindi kumakain tayo yung 'di ba minsan pag wala na talaga for survival, saka ka na kumakain yung may mga scammer dyan, no? Akala mo siopaw, pusa pala, or something like that. Nawala yung balance kasi. Yung sabi nila, so merong kakain sa daga, pero sino namang kakain sa pusa? So walang kumakain. So pumunta dun sa limitation na dumami at dumami ang population ng mga stray cats sa Australia. Same with our environment. We keep on buying things, no? Until such time that we reach to its limit. So, yung mga bagay na gusto natin, nagkikrave tayo for that na hindi naman talaga natin kailangan, little did we know na dumating na pala sa punto na nag-accumulate na siya na wala nang pwedeng mapuntahan at yun ang nangyari. So, parang sa basura lang, hindi natin alam, no? Yung mga gadgets for example, or your appliances, saan ba pupunta after nasira? Lalo na ngayon, 'di ba? The reason na hindi tatagal yung mga appliances natin dahil ma-stop yung sales nila. Kasi pag gagawa ka ng matibay na appliances, paano na yung yung sales nila hindi na para bang dahil napakatibay nito, hindi na siya masira, so hindi ka na makaproduce ng iba kasi gumawa ka ng matibay. So parang may expiration date siya. So yun, nasira na yung appliances mo and then you buy again another appliances. Sa replacement sa na-damage mo appliances. And doon, accumulate na lahat. Hindi mo na alam what's next. Andyan lang yan yung mga waste. Or yung mga gadgets mo. Kasi gustong-gusto mo yung latest. Ayan, tapos or sabihin natin nasira yung mga gadgets mo. So, saan ba yung pupunta? Ano bang pwedeng gawin dyan? So, yan, parang lahat. Kung sa panatapok na gid siya pag-ayo ng atong mga gamit na hindi natin alam kung ano bang mga dapat gawin ito. So, yung may mga system na sinasabi natin from the production or from the source, the production, parang ganyan. Tapos to the consumer and after ito masira, sana ba to? 'Di ba? Sell it or throw it, yeah. From Legion, yun nga sinasabi natin, if we are going to throw it, then we are contributing waste to our planet. Yun yung iniiwasan natin. So, ang pag-usapan natin ngayon is about stuff. Yung mga human activity. Yung mga stuff na yan, gawa yan ng human. So, saan natin kinukuha? To produce a stuff or to produce something. We get it from our environment. We get it from saan? Kinukuha natin sa mga kahoy, kinukuha natin sa mga tinatanim natin, di ba? So, panoorin nyo yung video na ipapakita ko sa inyo. Ito po yung story about stuff. When we say stuff, ito ibig po sabihin yung mga bagay-bagay. So, check this out. Huwag po kayong aalis kasi maganda po ang story na to. Malalaman nyo kung ano po ang makocontribute niya sa ating economy, sa ating social, sa mga tao, at sa ating environment. So check this out mga kapartner.
got a little obsessed with mine. In fact, I got a little obsessed with all my stuff. Have you ever wondered where all the stuff we buy comes from and where it goes when we throw it out? I couldn't stop wondering about that, so I looked it up. And what the textbook said is that stuff moves through a system from extraction to production to distribution to consumption to disposal. All together, it's called the materials economy. Well, I looked into it a little bit more. In fact, I spent 10 years traveling the world, tracking where our stuff comes from and where it goes. And you know what I found out? That is not the whole story. There is a lot missing from this explanation. For one thing, this system looks like it's fine. No problem. But the truth is, it's a system in crisis. And the reason it's a system in crisis is it's a linear system and we live on a finite planet. And you cannot run a linear system on a finite planet indefinitely. Every step along the way, this system is interacting with the real world. In real life, it's not happening on a blank white page. It's interacting with societies, cultures, economies, the environment. And all along the way, it's bumping up against limits. Limits we don't see here because the diagram is incomplete. So let's go back through. Let's fill in some of the blanks and see what's missing. Well, one of the most important things that's missing is people. Yes, people. People live and work all along this system. And some people in this system matter a little more than others. Some have a little more say. Who are they? Well, let's start with the government. Now, my friends tell me I should use a tank to symbolize the government, and that's true in many countries and increasingly in our own. After all, more than 50% of our federal tax money is now going to the military. But I'm using a person to symbolize the government because I hold true to the vision and values the government should be of the people, by the people, for the people. It's the government's job to watch out for us, to take care of us. That's their job. Then along came the corporation. Now, the reason the corporation looks bigger than the government is that the corporation is bigger than the government. Of the 100 largest economies on Earth now, 51 are corporations. And as the corporation has grown in size and power, we've seen a little change in the government where they're a little more concerned in making sure everything's working out for those guys than for us. Okay, so let's see what else is missing from this picture. We'll start with extraction, which is a fancy word for natural resource exploitation, which is a fancy word for trashing the planet. What this looks like is we chop down the trees, we blow up mountains to get the metals inside, we use up all the water, and we wipe out the animals. So here, we are running up against our first limit. We are running out of resources. We are using too much stuff. Now, I know this can be hard to hear, but it's the truth, so we've got to deal with it. In the past 3 decades alone, 1/3 of the planet's natural resource base has been consumed. Gone. We are cutting and mining and hauling and trashing the place so fast that we're undermining the planet's very ability for people to live here. Where I live, in the United States, we have less than 4% of our original forests left. 40% of the waterways have become undrinkable. And our problem is not just that we're using too much stuff, but we're using more than our share. We have 5% of the world's population, but we're using 30% of the world's resources and creating 30% of the world's waste. If everybody consumed at US rates, we would need 3 to 5 planets. And you know what? We've only got 1. So my country's response to this limitation is simply to go take somebody else's. This is the third world, which some would say is another word for our stuff that somehow got on somebody else's land. So what does that look like? The same thing, trashing the place. 75% of global fisheries now are fished at or beyond capacity. 80% of the planet's original forests are gone. In the Amazon alone, we're losing 2,000 trees a minute. That is 7 football fields a minute. And what about the people who live here? Well, according to these guys, they don't own these resources, even if they've been living there for generations. They don't own the means of production, and they're not buying a lot of stuff. And in this system, if you don't own or buy a lot of stuff, you don't have value. So next, the materials move to production. And what happens there is we use energy to mix toxic chemicals in with the natural resources to make toxic contaminated products. There are over 100,000 synthetic chemicals in use in commerce today. Only a handful of them have even been tested for health impacts, and none have been tested for synergistic health impacts. That means when they interact with all the other chemicals we're exposed to every day. So we don't know the full impact on health and the environment of all these toxic chemicals, but we do know one thing: toxics in, toxics out. As long as we keep putting toxics into our industrial production systems, We're gonna keep getting toxics in the stuff that we bring into our homes and workplaces and schools, and our bodies. Like BFRs, brominated flame retardants, they're a chemical that make things more fireproof, but they are super toxic. They're a neurotoxin. That means toxic to the brain. What are we even doing using a chemical like this? Yet we put it in our computers, our appliances, couches, mattresses, even some pillows. In fact, we take our pillows, we douse them in a neurotoxin, then we bring them home and put our heads on them for 8 hours a night to sleep. Now, I don't know, but it seems to me in this country with so much potential, we could think of a better way to stop our heads from catching on fire at night. Now, these toxics build up the food chain and concentrate in our bodies. Do you know what is the food at the top of the food chain with the highest level of many toxic contaminants? Human breast milk. That means that we've reached a point where the smallest members of our societies, our babies, are getting the highest lifetime dose of toxic chemicals from breastfeeding from their mothers. Is that not an incredible violation? Breastfeeding must be the most fundamental human act of nurturing. It should be sacred and safe. Now, breastfeeding is still best, and mothers should definitely keep breastfeeding, but we should protect it. They should protect it. I thought they were looking out for us. And of course, the people who bear the biggest brunt of these toxic chemicals are the factory workers, many of whom are women of reproductive age. They're working with reproductive toxins, carcinogens, and more. Now I ask you, what kind of woman of reproductive age would work in a job exposed to reproductive toxins except for a woman with no other option? And that's one of the beauties of this system. The erosion of local environments and economies here ensures a constant supply of people with no other option. Globally, 200,000 people a day are moving from environments that have sustained them for generations into cities, many to live in slums, looking for work, no matter how toxic that work may be. So you see, it's not just resources that are wasted along this system, but people too. Whole communities get wasted. Yep, toxics in, toxics out. A lot of the toxics leave the factories in products, but even more leave as byproducts or pollution. And it's a lot of pollution. In the US, our industry admits to releasing over 4 billion pounds of toxic chemicals a year. And it's probably a lot more because that's only what they admit. So that's another limit, because yuck, who wants to look at and smell 4 billion pounds of toxic chemicals a year? So what do? Move the dirty factories overseas, pollute someone else's land. But surprise, a lot of that pollution is coming right back at us, carried by wind currents. So what happens after all these natural resources are turned into products? Well, it moves here for distribution. Now, distribution means selling all the toxic contaminated junk as quickly as possible. The goal here is to keep the prices down, keep the people buying, and keep the inventory moving. How do they keep the prices down? Well, they don't pay the store workers very much, and they skimp on health insurance every time they can. It's all about externalizing the costs. What that means is that the real costs of making stuff aren't captured in the price. In other words, we aren't paying for the stuff we buy. I was thinking about this the other day. I was walking to work and I wanted to listen to the news, so I popped into a Radio Shack to buy a radio. I found this cute little green radio for $4.99. I was standing there in line to buy this thing, and I was thinking, how could $4.99 possibly capture the cost of making this radio and getting it into my hands? The metal was probably mined in South Africa. The petroleum was probably drilled in Iraq. The plastics were probably produced in China. And maybe the whole thing was assembled by some 15-year-old in a maquiladora in Mexico. $4.99 wouldn't even pay the rent for the shelf space it occupied until I came along, let alone part of the staff guy's salary who helped me pick it out, or the multiple ocean cruises and truck rides pieces of this radio went on. That's how I realized I didn't pay for the radio. So who did pay? Well, these people paid with the loss of their natural resource space. These people paid with the loss of their clean air, with increasing asthma and cancer rates. Kids in the Congo paid with their future. 30% of the kids in part of the Congo have dropped out of school to mine coltan, a metal we need for our cheap and disposable electronics. These people even paid by having to cover their own health insurance. All along this system, people pitched in so I could get this radio for $4.99. And none of these contributions are recorded in any accounts book. That's what I mean by the company owners externalize the true costs of production. And that brings us to the golden arrow of consumption. This is the heart of the system, the engine that drives it. It is so important that protecting this arrow has become the top priority for both of these guys. That's why after 9/11, when our country was in shock, and President Bush could have suggested any number of appropriate things, to grieve, to pray, to hope. No, he said to shop, to shop. We have become a nation of consumers. Our primary identity has become that of being consumers, not mothers, teachers, farmers, but consumers. The primary way that our value is measured and demonstrated is by how much we contribute to this arrow, how much we consume. And do we? We shop and shop and shop, keep the materials flowing, and flow they do. Guess what percentage of total materials flow through this system is still in product or use 6 months after their date of sale in North America? 50%? 20? No, 1%. 1. In other words, 99% of the stuff we harvest, mine, process, transport, 99% of the stuff we run through this system is trashed within 6 months. Now, how can we run a planet with that level of materials throughput? It wasn't always like this. The average US person now consumes twice as much as they did 50 years ago. Ask your grandma. In her day, stewardship and resourcefulness and thrift were valued. So how did this happen? Well, it didn't just happen. It was designed. Shortly after World War II, these guys were figuring out how to ramp up the economy. Retailing analyst Victor Lebeau articulated the solution that's become the norm for the whole system. He said, our enormously productive economy demands that we make consumption our way of life, that we convert the buying and use of goods into rituals, that we seek our spiritual satisfaction, our ego satisfaction in consumption. We need things consumed, burned up, replaced, and discarded at an ever-accelerating rate. President Eisenhower's Council of Economic Advisors chairman said that the American economy's ultimate purpose is to produce more consumer goods. More consumer goods? Our ultimate purpose? Not provide health care or education or safe transportation or sustainability or justice? Consumer goods? How did they get us to jump on board this program so enthusiastically? Well, two of their most effective strategies are planned obsolescence and perceived obsolescence. Planned obsolescence is another word for designed for the dump. It means they actually make stuff to be useless as quickly as possible, so we'll chuck it and buy a new one. It's obvious with things like plastic bags and coffee cups, but now it's even big stuff. Mops, DVDs, cameras, barbecues even, everything. Even computers. Have you noticed that when you buy a computer now, the technology is changing so fast that in just a couple of years, it's actually an impediment to communication? I was curious about this, so I opened up a big desktop computer to see what was inside. And I found out that the piece that changes each year is just a tiny little piece in the corner. But you can't just change that one piece because each new version is a different shape. So you gotta chuck the whole thing and buy a new one. So I was reading industrial design journals from the 1950s when planned obsolescence was really catching on. These designers are so open about it. They actually discuss how fast can they make stuff break that still leaves the consumer having enough faith in the product to go out and buy another one. It was so intentional. But stuff cannot break fast enough to keep this arrow afloat. So there's also perceived obsolescence. Now, perceived obsolescence convinces us to throw away stuff that is still perfectly useful. How do they do that? Well, they change the way the stuff looks. So if you bought your stuff a couple of years ago, everyone can tell that you haven't contributed to this arrow recently. And since the way we demonstrate our value is contributing to this arrow, it can be embarrassing. Like, I've had the same fat white computer monitor on my desk for 5 years. My coworker just got a new computer. She has a flat, shiny, sleek monitor. It matches her computer, it matches her phone, even her pen stand. She looks like she's driving in Spaceship Central, and I look like I've got a washing machine on my desk. Fashion is another prime example of this. Have you ever wondered why women's shoe heels go from fat one year to skinny the next to fat to skinny? It's not because there's some debate about which heel structure is the most healthy for women's feet. It's because wearing fat heels in a skinny heel year shows everybody that you haven't contributed to that arrow as recently, so you're not as valuable as that person in skinny heels next to you, or more likely in some ad. It's to keep us buying new shoes. Advertisements and media in general plays a big role in this. Each of us in the US is targeted with over 3,000 advertisements a day. We see more advertisements in 1 year than people 50 years ago saw in a lifetime. And if you think about it, what's the point of an ad except to make us unhappy with what we have? So 3,000 times a day, we're told our hair is wrong, our skin is wrong, our clothes are wrong, our furniture is wrong, our car is wrong, we are wrong, but it can all be made right if we just go shopping. Media also helps by hiding all of this and all of this. So the only part of the materials economy we see is the shopping. The extraction, production, and disposal all happens outside of our field of vision. So in the US, we have more stuff than ever before, but polls show that our national happiness is actually declining. Our national happiness peaked in the 1950s, the same time that this consumption mania exploded. Interesting coincidence. I think I know why. We have more stuff, but we have less time for the things that really make us happy. Friends, family, leisure time. We're working harder than ever. Some analysts say we have less leisure time than any time since feudal society. And do you know what the two main activities are that we do with the scant leisure time we have? Watch TV and shop. In the US, we spend 3 to 4 times as many hours shopping as our counterparts in Europe do. So we're in this ridiculous situation where we go to work, maybe 2 jobs even, and we come home and we're exhausted. So we plop down on our new couch and watch TV, and the commercials tell us you suck. So you gotta go to the mall to buy something to feel better, and then you gotta go to work more to pay for the stuff you just bought. So you come home and you're more tired, so you sit down and you watch more TV, and it tells you to go to the mall again, and we're on this crazy work, watch, spend treadmill, and we could just stop. So in the end, what happens to all the stuff we buy anyway? At this rate of consumption, it can't fit into our houses, even though the average house size has doubled in this country since the 1970s. It all goes out in the garbage. And that brings us to disposal. This is the part of the materials economy we all know the most because we have to haul the junk out to the curb ourselves. Each of us in the United States makes 4.5 pounds of garbage a day. That's twice what we each made 30 years ago. All of this garbage either gets dumped in a landfill, which is just a big hole in the ground, or if you're really unlucky, first it's burned in an incinerator and then dumped in the landfill. Either way, they both pollute the air, land, water, and don't forget, change the climate. Incineration is really bad. Remember those toxics back in the production stage? Well, burning the garbage releases the toxics up into the air. Even worse, it makes new super toxics, like dioxin. Dioxin is the most toxic man-made substance known to science, and incinerators are the #1 source of dioxin. That means that we could stop the #1 source of the most toxic man-made substance known just by stopping burning the trash. We could stop it today. Now, some companies don't want to deal with building landfills and incinerators here, so they just export the disposal too. What about recycling? Does recycling help? Yes, recycling helps. Recycling reduces the garbage at this end, and it reduces the pressure to mine and harvest new stuff at this end. Yes, 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 we should all recycle, but recycling is not enough. Recycling will never be enough, for a couple reasons. First, the waste coming out of our houses is just the tip of the iceberg. For every 1 garbage can of waste you put out on the curb, 70 garbage cans of waste were made upstream just to make the junk in that 1 garbage can you put out on the curb. So even if we could recycle 100% of the waste coming out of our households, it doesn't get to the core of the problems. Also, much of the garbage can't be recycled, either because it contains too many toxics or it's designed not to be recyclable in the first place. Like those juice packs, where they have layers of metal and paper and plastic all smushed together, you can never separate those for true recycling. So you see, it is a system in crisis. All along the way, we're bumping up against limits. From changing climate to declining happiness, it's just not working. But the good thing about such an all-pervasive problem is there are so many points of intervention. There are people working here on saving forests, here on clean production, labor rights, fair trade, conscious consuming, blocking landfills and incinerators, and very importantly, taking back our government, so that it really is by the people, for the people. All of this work is critically important, but things really start moving when we see the connections, when we see the big picture. When people all along this system get united, we can reclaim and transform this whole linear system into something new. A system that doesn't waste resources or people. You see, what we really need to chuck is that old school throwaway mindset. There's a new school of thinking about this stuff, and it's based on sustainability and equity. Things like green chemistry, zero waste, closed loop production, renewable energy, local living economies. It's already started. Some say it's unrealistic, too idealistic that it can't happen. I say the ones who are unrealistic are those who think that we can continue with the old way. They're dreaming. Remember, that old way didn't just happen. It wasn't like gravity that we just have to live with. People created it. And we're people too. So let's create something new. There's a lot of information on this website about groups doing incredible work. Click around. Get involved.
Ayan, napanood nyo po yung story about stuff. So, ano bang napulot nyo pong aral sa kwentong yon? Magandang gabi sa ating 200 viewers. Thank you so much for watching. Yan, napakahalaga pong malaman natin yung mga ginagawa po ng mga tao, tatawag nating human activity, nagko-contribute po siya ng waste sa buong mundo. So, nalimutan na natin, napunta tayo sa, we reached to that limit na hindi na natin alam kung anong gagawin. 'Di ba? Like, kasi, imagine how many billions of people ang nakatira sa buong mundo. Tapos, araw-araw, meron tayong waste. No? We keep on buying something. At saka yung mga binabay natin, hindi naman lahat for keeps. Hindi lahat magamit siya forever. Yung iba, sinasabi ko nga kanina, pwede mo lang siyang gamitin or kainin. Seconds lang or minutes lang, tapos itatapon mo na. So, lalo-lalo na yung mga kinukonsume natin, yung mga pagkain, yung mga containers, yung mga Tetra Paks, yung mga plastics. Kakain tayo 3 times a day, meron pa tayong pa-snacks. 'Di ba? Tapos pagkakasira lang or merong bagong mga fashion, we want to be part of the trend. Kasi if di tayo bibili ng anong latest, matatakot tayong i-judge sa ating mga friends that baka sabihin tayong hindi tayo in. So may mga ganung bagay na pressure tayo to buy something. Ang daming mga factors kung bakit tayo bumibili ng something na hindi naman talaga natin kailangan. So, yun yung nangyayari. Dumating sa point na na-imbak na lahat yung mga waste. So, tinatapon siya and then, dun papasok yung air pollution, yung water pollution, yung land pollution, lahat ng mga pollution. Ibibigay balik sa atin. So, yan. Yung cause ng human activity, tayo din ang magsasuffer. 'Di ba? Hindi natin naisip agad o hindi natin natingnan kung anong pwedeng mangyayari after na ginagawa natin yun. So, para bang ano yung mga consequences after doing such thing? Hindi natin napag-isip kasi what we want is just to satisfy ourselves of those things that we really want. Parang ganun lang. Yung happiness kasi natin, parang, it's just a temporary happiness. When we want to satisfy ourselves with just material things, temporary lang kasi yan. At hindi kasi yan kasi totoong, parang yung iba kasi ma-comfort lang sila when they buy the latest gadget. Maka-comfort sila when they eat something very delicious or when they eat something na favorite nila. Kasi tayo, yung satisfaction natin, yung comfort sometimes, tinitingnan natin sa mga material na bagay. So yan, di ba? When we look our satisfaction based sa ating mga material things, yun ang nangyayari. Diba? Ang daming mga stuff na accumulate na, naging waste na siya, tapos binabalik natin sa environment. Reach to that limit that hindi na natin alam kung anong gawin doon kasi meron tayong tinatawag, kung napanood nyo kanina, merong for dump, meron pwede siyang ma-reuse, yung mga, like for example, empty bottles, pwede nating ma-reuse, di ba? To reduce. Parang the 3 R's. Pero, ano lang, hindi siya 100% that will really save our environment. Hindi 100% that we can really protect our environment. Small portion lang siya na pwede nating ma-reduce. But we are not really making it na zero talaga. So, konti lang. At in, very lang, yung percent na yan that will help us to protect our environment. But maganda yan na meron tayong mga advocacy, yung mga campaign for our environment. So, ano nga ba yung mga role ng mga youth? Diba? Napakalaking role po ng mga youth, ng ating mga kabataan to save our planet. So, hindi man natin lubos pa maisip how, medyo mahirap, pero merong mga government sectors dyan na in charge for our environment na gumagawa. Meron din tayong, especially Accert po, kasama yan sa 4 core values, di ba? Makakalikasan, di ba? Makatao, makabayan, makatao, makabayan, kasama yung makakalikasan at makadiyos. Yung sinasabi natin that we human beings, we find our comfort sa mga material things. We find our comfort sa mga pagkain na favorite natin. So, minsan, hindi na natin naisip, nag-accumulate na yung mga bagay-bagay na yan, diba? Because we just want it, but actually, we don't need it. So, we want just to be part of what's the trend. Kasi if we left behind, pagtatawanan tayo, no? Sometimes we live according to the standards of our society. And then, little did we know that we are actually contributing destruction sa ating environment. So, maliit na bagay lang yan na tinitingnan natin. It's just parang, sinasabi lang natin, bagay lang yan. Yes, it's just a stuff. But actually, nanggaling yan sa atin because of what we want. Because of the activity, human activity, then it can really give destruction. Yan, so yan dyan na yung mga disaster na mangyayari. Kasi nga, because of the human activities. Papasok din yan yung mga natural calamities. Bakit din may natural disaster? Kasi nga, saan yung source na ginagawa ng mga staff? Sa ating natural resources, sa ating environment. And if hindi natin yan ma-protect, so pag may mga natural calamities na darating, hindi natin makontrol. So it will also cause, again, disaster. So natural disaster. Masasabi nating disaster, lalong-lalo na, it will give destruction, tapos ikakapahamak ng mga tao, at ikakasira ng ating environment. That is why, mga kapartner, lalong-lalo na yung mga kabataan ngayon, if nanonood kayo, you have a very big role sa ating bansa, sa ating society. Tinitrain kayo ng Junior Accert dahil we want you to be because we look at you as our great leaders someday. Para sa future. So, tinitrain kayo so that malaman nyo yung tawag dito, para alam nyo, no, na kayo pala yung tinitrain, kayo yung mga kasi kayo yung mga, hindi ka na ma-express. Nabubulol na. Sige, ganito. Kayo po yung hope, no? Kayo, mga kabataan natin, kayo po yung hope ng ating bansa. So, ayan. Kaya sa ngayon lang, pwede kayong gumawa ng mga kahit you start within yourselves. Sa sarili natin. Simple lang. Yung mga kinakain natin, for example, huwag natin itapon kahit saan. Bibili lang tayo na kung ano lang yung kailangan natin. Huwag tayong bibili kung meron pa naman tayong mga pwede pa talagang gamitin. And aside from that, again, let us help spread awareness since nasa na tayo, digital world na tayo. 'Di ba? Let us help spreading awareness by using our social media to help save our environment. So this, Monday, malalaman natin yung mga other environmental issues. So doon natin malalaman, pakilala natin yung story of the plastic. May mga ganyan tayong mga kwento on Monday. So, yung environmental, topic, environmental protection topic natin, kasi part of the 4 core values sa Junior Accert, yung maka-Diyos, makatao, makabansa, at makakalikasan. So dito tayo, makakalikasan tayo na part. So let us help also. Aside from that, let us spread awareness sa ating mga kabataan, sa mga nanonood natin dyan, na mga parents, guardians. Kasi sa every child's success is a parent behind. Yung mga magulang, behind. Pero parang, di ba? Sila yung kasing nag-guide. Napakalaking role din ng mga parents natin, yung mga elders natin. Hindi lang ibig sabihin yung parents lang ha, yung mga guardians din, at yung sinasabi kong elders, ibig sabihin yung mas nakakatanda, tayong mas nakakatanda, let's serve as a good example to our children, to the youth. Very important po yan. Para po, let's become a good influencer to them. Kasi 'di ba sinasabi natin kung anong makikita nila, yun yung gagayahin nila. So let's be good example to our youth. So mga ka-online friends, wala na po tayong oras. Time check, it's already 8 in the evening. Ipagpatuloy natin yung topic natin about sa environment this Monday. So enjoy your weekend, guys. And I hope you always protect yourselves. Dapat protektahan nyo talaga, lalong-lalo na nasa gitna pa tayo ng pandemic. So keep safe, God bless sa ating mga kapartner, and magandang gabi sa inyong lahat, at magandang gabi Pilipinas.